What is up, everybody, and welcome to the UHC Season 11 pregame show. I'm your host, Mr. Ace the Mech, and with me is my lovely co-host, Mr. NewsmanMickson.
Oh, yeah.
So in this pregame show, we're going to be taking a look back at what happened last season, taking a look ahead at this season, as well as comparing it to Season 6 and talking about things to look for, people to look for, and things that we could potentially expect from this season. So buckle up and let's get this started. So, last season we had UHC Season 10, where we did the Find Your Partner UHC, teams of two, and it proved to be a pretty interesting dynamic where we saw some players spend a lot of their time above ground searching for someone else, making it their top priority, whereas others ended up staying underground in hopes that they could find someone later on in the season. So that was a pretty interesting dynamic there, I believe.
Yeah, and the mechanic itself, I was actually a big fan of, because there's definitely strength in numbers, and finding a partner is definitely a priority. But when you start to let it affect how you actually play the game and hinder you from getting resources that may or may not be more important, the first couple of episodes, that's when that decision can kind of impact your whole game.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that it presented in a very brief fashion was when Mary Gamer ran into Canuck Bacon early on and decided that he was going to get into combat early, and Canuck was able to actually play it smart and draw him over to another team. So
Right.
it shows how being by yourself could be an advantage and a disadvantage in that season. So pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. And as many PVE deaths as there was, it very well could have ended up being the only person on a team due to a lot of odd numbers. So it was risky too.
Yes, only 4 people died to PvP. It was a very low killing season.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that was partially due to a half pre-generated world to kick things off, where there was unfortunate large amounts of lag that caused the server to crash a few times, and unfortunately cost the lives of both myself and Skipper the Reaper before the lag was able to subside. So that was...
Yeah, and that's very, very unfortunate. And that's one of those things. In the first few episodes, you can see you're on the point. Not you personally, but the players. When do you decide, is this an official UHC, or do we just scrap it and start over? Has it reached that point of being that bad?
Yeah, there was a lot of debate as to whether or not we should have tried it again and wait until the world was fully pre-generated, or to just push it out, and we eventually just worked through it. But unfortunately, it cost the lives of 2 players during that season. Let's see, further along, we had, like I said, there were 4 PvP deaths. The first one was Weathermaster falling victim to Shawson and Notorious Park at 0-0. And
That was quite a good fight.
yeah, it looks like they, from Weathermaster's point of view, it looks like they kind of snuck up on him, and he unfortunately had no way to defend himself, found himself cornered, and fell victim. Further along in the season, we had probably what I would say is my favorite fight of the night was Shawson versus Fire Eyes and Dakota Files. It was
Right.
Really interesting to see whether Shawson's Infinity Bow would be able to take down the outnumbered opponent of Fire Eyes and Dakota. So it was a pretty exciting battle there.
Yes, yeah, both were very strong and they held their own. I wouldn't say it was one-sided. I think that Bo helped even it out. And can we discuss briefly Dakota's absence
Yes,
due
because
to dinner?
that happened shortly afterwards, where he got pulled away and left Fire Eyes to fend for himself, and he actually did really well in that, able
Right.
to fend off Nixer and his wolves, as well as the Merry Gamer, which we'll get to that in just a second. But
Mhm.
it was a very strong performance from Fire Eyes to be able to fend off that many attacks on his own.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's really impressive. You know, wolves they can be great, or in some cases, some UHCs they have hurt players even.
Yep.
Uh, with the new entity collision, I know there's been UHCs in the past with Mindcrack where they have actually taken damage
Yep.
from their own wolves, and especially if it's a team, if you hit another player's wolf, I mean it's over for you. If they've got a pack of 8 or more, you're done. So
Yeah, it was a really that was a really interesting battle. I think one thing that helped Fire Eyes was the fact that it got into Nixer's head that he thought Dakota was potentially flanking somewhere when he was just
mhm.
in a hole eating some food. So,
Right. Yeah, a
and
lot of
then,
UHC is psychological, I would
yep,
say. So it's funny how you overanalyze every detail like that.
yeah, you expect the worst, and I think that's what kept Nixer from getting too close to Fire Eyes, and eventually led to his demise there.
Hmm.
So throughout the entire season, there was kind of half-hearted talks as to whether or not we were going to call this season a failed one, if we were going to have another season 10 or a very quick season 11, which we kind of are. But what made it official that we were going to try really hard to make this next season better was the ending battle between Fire Eyes and Mary, where a decision was made to move the world border closer. However, it moved in a little too close and ended up killing Mary directly, causing a false finish in which they had to reset, and I think it threw off Mary enough to where he ended up losing that one and giving the win to Fire Eyes and Dakota. So,
Right, and that was a good battle up until that point. Do you think it was a smart decision to interfere at all? Do you think they should have even touched the world border at that point, being the final fight?
I think in retrospect they probably should not have, because they were both already there. So
Hmm.
it was kind of, it didn't really, wasn't necessary at that point.
Right.
Um, I think it was intended to keep them from getting too far away from each other, to prevent the season from getting too long, but it ended up messing things up a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah, and um, you're right as far as it shaking Mary. As far as you can tell in the video, it is as fair as it can be based on health and equipment.
yeah,
But it was a matter of seconds once they started again that the fight was over. So obviously the world border did have some sort of ill effect on the situation.
yeah. It is. It would have been interesting to see what could have been if the world border mishap had not happened. See if
Right.
Mary could have had an advantage there. But it did not actually matter for Mary because looking at the leaderboard after 10 seasons, he is actually the champion of the first 10 seasons of UHC. He was able to capture that title simply by showing up because Hollywood, who was the only person who had a chance of catching him, was not able to attend that season. So big congratulations to him for staying consistent and picking up the win there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Big congrats.
And to look back at the leaderboard through 10 seasons, Mary Gamer, like we said, picked up the win with 175 points, 35 points over Hollywood, who was unfortunately unable to show up. Canuck Bacon took up the third position with 113 points. He is the only player thus far to have attended all 10 seasons, so pretty big deal for him.
Absolutely.
The closest gap we had was 1 point behind with Mr. Muckluck in fourth place. He has been kind of the surprise for the top 10, being
Absolutely.
able to stay as consistent as he is, despite, I guess, how people have viewed his seasons, maybe?
Right. He has a very nonchalant attitude, I would say, and he's definitely in it for fun, which is what it's about in the end is fun. But some of his shenanigans have been a little more notable, I would say.
Yes. So. Jad Murdoch is in fifth place with an even 100 points. He was the only other person to play all 9 seasons, but was unable to attend Season 10. Sir Maxis was able to hold on to 6th place despite not showing up, as well as Oddsboy in 7th, 98 and 96 points, respectively. Adrian, who made a return this season, was able to jump into the 8th spot with 92 points. Bufadine in 9th place with 90 points, and Notorious Park rounded up the top 10 with 87 points, so good job to all of them.
Absolutely.
So this next season, Season 10, we are actually going to be resetting the leaderboard with a clean slate, so everybody will now have a new chance of being able to climb the ranks, especially because we got so many new players joining the server lately.
Yes, and I'm excited to see that because we don't really know what to expect from a lot of the new players, right? The numbers we've generated over the past 10 have slowly kind of shaped and made a decision of who to look out for, but it's hard to really get a decision of the newer players who really is a strong PvP competitor or just a strong UHC competitor overall. So
yeah, and with the last 10 seasons having people come and go, some guys had really strong performances in their one and only season, and that helped them get into a top spot and hold it. Whereas others like Naxer, who has won a couple seasons but joined way back in Season 6, he hasn't been able to crack the top 10 despite how strong his performances have been. So so this will give people like that a chance to actually have a better chance at climbing the ranks, and even though we caught a peek of how some of the new players have played in Season 10, this will give them a chance to actually show their strength in the next 10 seasons.
Absolutely, it'll be good to see what happens. Yeah.
Yes. So now that Season 10 is officially in the books, we're going to be taking a look at UHC Season 11, which will be our second ever Race to the Ender Dragon season.
Very exciting. The first one was Season 6, correct?
Yes, and it was a very exciting season, one that generated a bit of controversy as well, as we will talk about in a little bit. But what will be really interesting about this is the new mechanics of 1.10, not only in the way other mobs act, especially the skeletons, who are a lot more accurate and a lot more skillful nowadays. Yeah. As well as local difficulty, where more mobs will spawn the longer you stay in the same spot. We saw some of that in Season 10. And also the fact that the Ender Dragon has a couple new tricks up her sleeve, where she has a new attack featuring the Dragon's Breath, which will be pretty interesting to see how players will be able to react to that.
Right, and we've seen on the server when some of the newer members joined, they fought the dragon relatively soon, and I don't recall who it was. I believe it was Cookie, but didn't have his particles turned on, and he didn't even see the dragon's breath, and died multiple times, near instantly from it. So
Yeah.
I feel like the dragon's breath will definitely make some complications in a UHC.
Yep, and what will make things even more complicated is that some of the healing beacons are now surrounded in iron bars, which means some players will actually have to dig up to it and break those iron bars just so they can break these beacons. So,
Yeah, very easily could we see maybe some more fall damage deaths in this game.
yep. And
You're not,
it'll be interesting if they go for those beacons at all, depending on how many there actually are that are covered up.
right. That makes it really difficult because the the dragon fight changes the whole dynamic
Yep.
of the UHC itself. You know, you've got different priorities, and it's not necessarily about PvP anymore, though that's a very big factor, especially, you know, with what we saw in season 6, but again, more on that in a moment. But you know, you've got to prioritize. To me, one thing that really makes or break a season of UHC for certain teams is the decision to nether rush,
Yep.
and it can be very catastrophic, or it can go very, very well, and we've seen both. But it's nearly mandatory for this. I mean, technically, you could get Eyes of Ender through villager trading, but that's about the only way. That and killing another player who has already been to the end. That's it. I mean, you almost mandatorily have to go to the Nether, and that in itself is a feat.
Yep.
So to pile that on top of going to the end, which the players will most likely already be pretty battled and bruised from that, and maybe other player encounters and PVE, it'll be a very interesting fight to see who and if players can make it and beat the dragon.
Yep. And going into the Nether will probably provide a lot of players with potions as well.
Right.
We'll be seeing those probably a lot more than we would see in any other season. It will add an extra dynamic to the game, and it could be possible that someone might forego the Nether altogether and just wait for someone else to have a go at the dragon and try to pick up the pieces there. So it'll be interesting.
Very much so.
Other little tidbits for season 11. It'll be teams of 4, just like season 6, and we're gonna have a couple little extra rules for this season just to make sure things don't get too out of hand. One of them is to not camp the end platform. There's a little bit of controversy in that in season 6, not too bad, but we would like to encourage people to try to not purposefully camp the spawn platform for the end. And we also would like to ask people to not break any of the blaze spawners in this season to give people a chance to have a go at the end and get all the materials that they need.
Yeah, although, you know, it is about fun and winning, and we see players, you know, kind of screwing over other players. You know, for
Yeah.
example, it's commonplace to take all the crops in a village, but that to me would borderline poor sportsmanship, because that is the end goal, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Is to go there, and if that's your only means, then that's your only means. So
Yeah, it could be possible that the one blaze farm we find is the only one in the entire fortress, and
absolutely.
if the person that breaks the spawner dies and all their gear despawns, then there's no way for anybody to get to the end. So we would like to make sure that the opportunities are always open. So as we mentioned before, we had a previous UHC Race to the Dragon, and that was back in Season 6, where teams of 4 made their way into the end to fight the dragon. There's a little bit of controversy at a couple points in time. One of them we've mentioned was camping the spawn platform, where Hollywood's team wasn't exactly intentionally doing so, but they were pretty close to it, and it resulted in the death of the Merry Gamers team almost entirely. So we're trying, like we said, we're trying to encourage people to not get too close to the platform, not intentionally camp it. So, but that proved to be an interesting turning point for people going into the end in that season.
Yeah, and all the rush going on, it's very easy to kind of forget because there's so many priorities you have. So I don't think it was intentional, but if players have that in the back of their minds going into this season, it should prevent any future events like that.
Yes. Speaking of Hollywood's team, they were able to pick up a back-to-back win. They were able to win in Season 5, Hollywood and Bufudan. They were able to join back up together for Season 6, and were able to kill the dragon with help of Kayla, a.k.a. KK Sippy Cup, who ended up providing the most controversial finish to a UHC we've had thus far, where
Right.
she was able to kill the dragon at the exact same time that the dragon killed her.
That's you don't see that. You really don't.
Yeah.
Especially a shot like that in the a UHC, but at all. That's very very controversial.
Yeah, there was a lot of talks as to whether or not the dragon would have won because everybody died, or if Hollywood's team would have won because they were able to kill the dragon. Either way, they were the last team standing, and they were able to complete the objective. So I believe the official ruling would be that they were official winners of that season.
And that seems fair to me. They did kill the dragon ultimately.
Yep. But one interesting dynamic of that season that I was a part of, an interesting dynamic was the fact that the green team, which featured a new player by the name of Winter's Lock, who was a special guest for that season, his team was able to pick up the most kills that season. However, and as a matter of fact, they were the first team to go into the end, but they were not able to win that season. So it just goes to show that you don't have to be the most highest killing team, I guess, in the UHC to pick up a win in this kind of event.
Absolutely, yeah. As we mentioned before, a lot of strategy, a lot of long-term planning, and sometimes it can even be more beneficial, though very risky, to not be the first team to the end.
Yep. We've seen, to kind of branch off into other UHCs, for example, on the Minecraft server, when they do their Race to the Dragons, there's a lot of debate when somebody goes into the end. There seems to be a lot of debate as to whether or not you should rush in after them right away, or if you should take a little bit of time to gather up some extra resources and be as strong as you can. There's been a lot of hesitation from some teams when trying to decide whether to follow a team into the end to be that team to kill the Ender Dragon. But
Yeah, it's real tough decision. It's always impossible to know the outcome ahead of time, but that split-second decision can lead you to victory or not. So
yeah. So from that season, since it's been a little while, I think it would be a nice idea to do it again. It'll be interesting to see how the new mechanics of the game will change how people are able to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. And next up, we have who to look out for, and of course, we've got some the top veteran players that you would expect, like maybe Mary or Hollywood. And although we don't know the entirety of who's attending, they are definitely a couple players to look out for. I'm also very curious about Notorious Park and Nixer, who both are tied with the largest number of kills, but Nixer was in fact on the winning team of the previous Race for the Dragon. So that's definitely worth noting. And Bufadine as well. I feel like she'd be very, very competent in this situation with her experience.
Yeah, and a fun fact about Bufadine is that she's actually won 3 UHCs in a row. So
Wow.
she's usually more of the moral support on the team, but she knows just what team to be on. So
Right. Yeah. Maybe she's more supportive than just moral.
Yep.
A good luck charm, if nothing else.
And
Also, I'm very interested to see of the new players who is going to maybe make a name for themselves on this new leaderboard. We saw, the impressive skills Fire Eyes
yep.
last season, and very easily could we see another moment like that from players who we haven't really had an opportunity to see much from. So I'm curious as to see. I know we definitely do have some strong PvP players, but how will that translate into a Dragon UHC? We just don't know yet.
Yeah, Shastin also had a pretty strong performance last season, so I think he'll be another strong player. Joda, I know, has done a few UHCs in the past, so I think he has the potential of making a strong performance as long as he's got a good team around him. Last season he was by himself, and that might have cost him a little bit, but I think he would be another strong newcomer to this game.
Absolutely. I agree. I know in the few PvP encounters I've been on, he seems to be pretty competent as well. So
Yep.
we could talk about. Go ahead.
I was going to bring off maybe a couple people that could make a return for this UHC.
Yes. Absolutely.
Old Man Dan 18 has put himself as a maybe in terms of returning. He was the winner of Season 9 along with Naxer, so he could be another strong competitor if he ends up showing up to this season. Let's see, Hollywood missed last season, and he's also a maybe to show up. We have also seen a couple other people return to the server, such as Quiznam and Diavolo and Scazzard, who are old-time players way back in the Season 2 and even Season 1 days, so it could be possible that we see a couple of them make a return as well.
Yeah, and they've been relatively active. I would say it wasn't just a one-off 1 or 2 days. They've seemed consistently interested. So it would be interesting to see if they are able to attend as well.
Yeah, I know Quiznam took some interest in the UHC. Was asking questions about when it was and stuff. So could be a high chance that we might see him make a return.
That would be good. Any wild cards that you're expecting this season?
It could be possible that Mukluk might have a breakthrough season.
Hey, you never know.
He's usually been pretty much up there. He's another one of those players that I don't believe has picked up a win just yet, but this could be one of those ones where it's just different enough to where you could be able to see some players kind of come out of nowhere with a win here. All right, so for our final segment today, we are going to talk about a few big questions coming into this UHC. One of them being, could it be possible with all the new mechanics, all the new updates and such, could the Ender Dragon actually have a higher chance of winning this season?
And I think it's very possible. We have experienced players like we were talking about with who to look out for, but also what we mentioned previously is the Dragon fight has changed quite a bit since then, as well as just general gameplay. So we could very easily have a Dragon winner this season.
Yep. And the Dragon was so close to winning the last time we did it, and in the last Minecraft race for the Dragon actually ended up winning that season. So I think there could be a higher chance that she could pick up the win this time.
Yeah, and that season was that was new mechanics, correct?
Yes, that was. I believe there was only one player left by the time they actually made it to the end. So,
Right.
but let's see, other questions. There was, oh yes, can we hope that the world will be fully pre-generated this time?
Yes. Biggest question of all, I would say.
Yep. Hopefully it is. I believe Chris is going to be the main host this season, so hopefully we'll be able to get that squared away right away, so that we have as little lag as possible.
And one other thing I want to note, it's not necessarily a question, but it looks like Canuck is able to attend, correct?
I believe so, so he will
Yes.
be able to keep his streak alive.
Yes, so that is great. Despite his journey across America, he will be able to attend, so that's very good. So,
Yeah. Let's see.
One question I would have is how well do you think you and I will do this season?
I actually had a bit of a leading question to that one.
Okay. Go ahead.
Because I was going to ask, who do you think will have a breakthrough victory out of players that have been pretty close? I don't want to say myself, but...
Right. I would say yourself. How about that?
Okay. But I know Mary has been really close numerous times. Mukluk has been pretty close. I've been pretty close, except for last season, which I won't talk about. But, yeah, I think it'll be pretty interesting to see if some of these guys who have been ever so close and not won, to see if they can actually break through this season, especially with the fact that you don't have to kill everybody to win the game this time.
Right. It's speed and strategy for sure, and I'm always surprised to hear some of the players who haven't actually won, and they're some of the most dominating competitors in the JFS UHC. So I'll be very eager to see if one of those lucky individuals are able to break through, like you said.
Yeah, the Mary Gamer is definitely the biggest name on that list. He's claimed the championship without winning, so maybe he can actually turn things around in that aspect. But let's see, as for myself, I would very much like to not die first, at the very least. I made it through the first 10 seasons without dying to mobs and without dying early. And yeah, season 10, just first death to a creeper. So I would like for, at the very least, if I'm going to die, I would like to die in combat late in the season, as I usually do. If I can't win, of course.
And I agree for sure. It's always a gutting feeling to die in a UHC, but to die first to PVE, that's just, at least if you die first to PvP, it's not as bad. But yeah, that truly is a terrible feeling.
I was literally sitting at my desk with my hand over my mouth in complete silence for about 5 minutes straight. So I was not happy about that one. But what do you assuming you're able to make it, how do you think you will do?
Yes. Although this will be my first recorded UHC, I have participated in UHCs in the past. I have mixed feelings. I've talked a little bit recently about my ability to multitask, and it's not great. I feel like my strengths are, planning ahead, knowing what resources you need. Occasionally you'll see players just run by lapis or throw out leather or things like that, but a lot of it is getting leather and feathers before you go underground, looking for apples, and I think my strength is kind of hitting as many of those checks as possible and remembering. I'd say I'm pretty proficient in combat, so my biggest concern is the actual dragon itself this season. So other than that, I think I'll be a strong competitor. I definitely wouldn't say I'll be not necessarily someone to look out for on the top of the list, but I think I'll hold my own. Hopefully, as long as, like what you said, as long as you're not the first one to die, that's what really hinders you.
Yeah. So. Hopefully, we both end up on a strong team this season. One thing to look back at last season, a big question would be how many people do we expect to die to PvE instead of PvP? Obviously, the Race of the Dragon proves that you don't have to kill everybody to win, but there were a lot of deaths to creepers and skeletons and such last season. Like I said, only 4 people died in combat, so could we see more of that, or do you think people will be able to adapt a little better this time?
Well, I think it won't be as bad as last season. And if it is, that's concerning. But two reasons is a lot of it, like in your case and a few others, a lot of the PVE damage and even deaths was due to lag or lack of generation ahead of time. So if we can kind of remedy that, I think that'll help significantly. And also, now that most of the players attending this UHC attended the last, I would assume, I think that experience will help, and maybe just the more exposure, just day-to-day playing Minecraft will also help. So I think we'll still see a few PVE deaths. I think that's definitely unavoidable to some extent, but I'm confident in saying that we'll see less.
Yes. The only season where I believe it was season 9 that we had everybody die in combat within like the last couple episodes. So it's a very rare thing to see everybody survive the early episodes. But with the new updates, it's definitely changed the game a lot, and people have to kind of readjust to that. So I think we'll see a lot less PvE deaths, but I think there will also be a notable few. So I can agree with that.
I agree.
All right, and that will wrap it up for this UHC Season 11 pregame show. This season should be really exciting, and I can't wait to not only be a part of it, but to experience it from everybody else's perspective this season.
Me too. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So, for NewsmanMickson, I am Isanek, and I hope you guys have enjoyed watching, and we shall see you all in UHC. And now just look up at the sky.